I'm Absolute and this is my beat from scratch. I first got into music production as a teenager. I was just kind of dabbling in like loads of different little softwares until finally building up through most of them really. Like I was using Logic for a while and then now I just exclusively use Ableton. I'm able to do such a quick workflow with Ableton, especially when using the push, which I have ended up using now over keyboards most of the time. The amount I'm in the studio varies depending on how much I'm touring. I've just moved back into a studio in London, so I'm really excited to actually be fully present in a space with all my equipment, which I haven't had for about 6 months. So I'm looking forward to actually spending loads more time in the studio over the next little while. The way I like to start music really does change. I like to kind of keep it varied. Sometimes there'll be a sound on a synth or a bass that I really love that I'll just start playing, start jamming, and then start building up drums and start adding on to that. Sometimes if there's like a little groove that I've got going with the push, usually I'll start with a 909 drum machine. The samples from Mars stuff are really well done in Ableton. They sample loads of old equipment and they run it through lots of hardware. So it's great if you're on the road and you still want to get sounds that are sort of crisp, or if you don't really want to invest or aren't able to invest in lots of hardware. One of the good things about Ableton is you can kind of, in your user library, you can just save basically any plugin, any instrument that you like and you want to keep going back to. So it's quite a quick way to just dive straight back into stuff if you're in a zone with something or you're really enjoying a certain sound. Like I've just got tons of these saved. So I'll just go into my drums here, like there's 909s, there's from full drum machines to grooves, whatever I'm sort of feeling at the time, I can just dive in and it just kind of gives me a bit of a jump start. I'll use the push basically as a drum machine to start playing stuff in. We'll just start with a kick. And then I haven't had to record anything. I can literally just start playing. And then one of the features I love with Ableton is that I can then just go up here, click on this like MIDI capture, and it's kind of taken what I've just played. So, and it's also put it into the BPM that I was playing it at. The push is a MIDI controller. You can actually use it standalone with audio in there, but generally the way I use it is as a MIDI controller through Ableton. You can either turn it into a drum machine or you can play multiple pads at once as if you were playing a keyboard. So it's great if you're traveling. One of the other things that I really love about the push as well is when you're in MIDI mode, I'll scroll down here, I've got a MIDI channel set up here, which I can send to different things. So I'm currently sending it to these synths here. So I'll come into the MIDI channel and anything I send will send across to the synths. But one of my favorite things is I can just go in, click on the scale, decide what scale I want to be in. So now any note that I press in here is going to be in the right key. When I have the drum machine, I like to kind of put it into separate channels. So I can process each sound from the drum machine in a separate way. I've got a simple kick, and then let's get some hats going. So there we go, then we've got some hats. And that's just like super simple groove, just to kind of get a bit of a bass to start something on. And then usually, obviously I would expand on that, and then every few bars, I'll make sure that there's a transition or there's a few extra notes or something happening just to sort of create a bit more going on just in a straight constant loop. And what I have started doing, there's a new plugin that I found called Human. So what I then tend to do is just start putting that on each element of the drums. It basically adds in subtle changes to the groove, changes the timing. It just makes everything just feel a little bit more live. So just kind of keeps the listener a bit more engaged. And the changes can be quite subtle, but I think it just kind of adds to the whole element and keeps everything moving. I would probably start bringing in a bass here. There's a DX100 one here, which I just tend to gravitate towards a lot at the moment. Normally when I'm in this stage, I'll maybe do like 2 or 3 different bass lines, sit with them, see how they fit in the groove, and then pick the one that I think is strongest and then move forward with the tracks. Another feature I really like on Ableton is you hit the scale button up here, and then it puts everything into the scale. So you know whatever note you put in, it's going to be in the scale you're in currently. So it kind of, again, frees you up to just experiment. And then from there, I'd probably start putting some pads or some stabs, or adding in little vocal elements. Like I love in the drums and in the percussion just doing like tiny little vocal stabs, so it kind of just makes the drums feel a bit more alive. So let's see what I've got here. So this is something I had that I started working on a different track, but I actually quite like it in this. Maybe we'd find like an extra little stab as well. Sometimes I'll just go on Splice, find like a long vocal and just chop up little bits of it, so it kind of isn't recognizable from the original sample, but you know, it kind of still does the job that you need. Quite like that. So it kind of feels like a bit of a call and answer between those two vocal stabs now. Usually I'll group all bits of vocals together, and then I'll put a processing on some of them. So one of the processes that I pretty much put on any vocal that I use is the SSL channel. Just takes a bit of the bottom out, makes everything feel a little bit cleaner, and just sort of slots it nicely in the mix. So what I'd probably start doing now is just adding something just to kind of create a little bit of variation in the bass, that just kind of keeps you interested. And there's a plugin that I've been using a lot at the moment called Thermal. The way I kind of discover new plugins generally is when I'm collaborating with people and having studio sessions, we kind of just steal each other's plugins if there's something that works. Like Thermal, I got from Dot from London Grammar, because we've been working a lot in the studio together and have a new project together, so I stole that from him. Obviously we're always still learning stuff, and when you collaborate you just kind of see things from a different angle and see the way different other people work, and it just adds to your sort of knowledge and what you have access to. And then what I like to do with the Thermal is just record in my automation live, so it feels a little bit more organic, and not just like drawing in straight lines with automation. So with Thermal I tend to just like flick through some of the presets, see which is feeling like it fits the vibe, and then just working through them from there. Okay, so if I want to just record an automation, I'll make sure that this is armed up here, hit record. Okay, then from here, usually I would then start thinking about pads or strings. What I'm going to try and do is start sending MIDI across to some of the synths and see if we can get out some sounds that we like. I've made sure that we're in the right scale still. I've moved it to a minor, to A minor. And now, instead of just like punching in stuff, which I was doing with the drum machine, or just a bass line, now I'm going to be playing chords. But again, every note that I play is going to be in the scale of A minor. So I'm kind of free to just experiment a little bit more than I would be on the piano. Now that's in, we'll just capture the MIDI, and then I'm going to sort of duplicate that by using the ×2 here, and that just extends it out. I'm going to do that a couple of times. And now that's sending the MIDI to the synth, I can just now start manipulating it if I want to start playing around with filters. That is just a little layer to kind of add some tension and some drama. And it needs some reverb, it needs some delay. So I really like the D16 delays. And then because it's a string or a pad, I want it a little bit further back in the mix. So the way that I often do that is using a Waves reverb plugin called TrueVerb. And I flick through to New York Plate. I turn the balance up, the decay kind down a little bit, and then I bring the direct mix down. So all you're getting is the wet reverb. And it just makes the sound kind of pull back in the mix a little bit. So you still get the feeling of it, but it's just not in your face. And then it needs some EQ just to take some of the bottom out. From here, I would probably start adding in some extra parts that bring everything to life. So we've created a bit of tension, and once the release comes in, it feels like something needs to change. So just to keep it simple, I'm going to just add in an additional hi-hat for now. And I'll do that by just duplicating one of these drum machines, pulling out what was already there. And then I like to auto pan stuff, especially with my drums. Again, it just kind of gives movement and adds a bit more space in the mix. And I don't like to always put it on the beat. I kind of like to keep things off. So it just, again, just keeps the ear interested, just in a really subtle way. And I'm also going to add a panning on one of these others. Now what I would do is send MIDI back over to some of these synths and see what other sounds we can get out to keep building on this. Quite like that. Let's see how that sounds. I love using the little altar boy. I really love the harmonies that it creates. So let's just have a look. So I really like the way that it gives that movement. And it gives the perception of it changing pitch, but it doesn't actually take it out of the current scale that it's in. So I'm just going to record that in as automation. Okay, can you see that? So that's now put in the automation. I'm going to add a kickstart, which is basically a sidechain compression that just automatically sidechains it to a 4/4, but you can change the parameters. Let's see if it gives it a bit of pump. And I want to add in reverb. Now that I've just played that in, it's kind of feeling a little bit more cosmic. So it's making me wonder if I should kind of push it a bit more in that direction. And it's reminding me of like maybe using like a big Italo snare in there. A bit similar to the one I just used in my Bronski beat rework. I'm actually going to just get the exact one from there. I'm kind of liking the snare more than I like the sound I've just put in now. So it's just, I guess you have to weigh up which direction you know, which direction you want to take a track. One of my favorite bits is just discovering, and I love that you can start a track and it just end up completely different to how you imagined it at the start. That for me is feeling more like a vibe, so I think I'm actually going to sack off the synth that I did, keep in the snare. I feel it needs now like a new higher string part. I'm really like loving using Serum at the moment. Some of the sounds that you can get from there just feel so weighty. What I've also been doing is on Splice you can download presets from different packs, so that's what I've been doing. If I just want a bit of inspiration, or if there's like a certain sound that I don't have in hardware or in any of my soft synths currently, it's just a really good way of just dialing straight into a sound that you want to find. I'm just really enjoying high strings on this at the moment, so let's just add that in. I think it works well with the pad that we've got. Just put the MIDI in the right place and then just duplicate it. And then I'm going to add the same effects that I've put on the other pad. I'm just wondering if the lead from the Voyager might work as a breakdown. I'm going to leave it as a placeholder. It's probably not going to be where the track ends. Kind of hearing like maybe some piano parts kind of chopping in on top of this. So let's get out the standard M1. This is also, the M1 also has the classic organ, which is just used in a million tracks. I've used it in a ton of tracks too. But let's go on to the piano. The piano 16 I kind of like on this. A little tip, if for some reason your computer's not kind of catching up with your workflow, what you can do is just bounce a little audio section of the master, then start a new set. And again, just MIDI capture, and then I would just add some EQ to that. There's an EQ I really like to use, especially for piano. It's the Waves API 560, and it's just a much simplified version. You've only got a few channels that you can work with, and you can just really isolate the frequency that you want to either highlight or pull back. What I'm going to do is just save that MIDI and then bring it back into the arrangement so we can play around with it properly in there. Now we've got the parts in. So I'm just going to play around with the notes and see what feels best. So it's quite, it's a bit more simple, but let's just try that for now. I'm really like enjoying stuff that just is a bit more simple at the moment. So although there's quite a lot going on in the drums, I'm really like trying to not use loads of elements in my production now. I feel like there was a point where I was just throwing everything possible in, but just trying to bring the essence of the track down to the minimal amount and still get it to do what you want it to do, I think is when you have the most impact. From here, I would probably start just doing like a bit of a rougher range, and then seeing what parts felt a bit dull or what part needs a bit more life. Where I can add a bit more drama, where I can add some more tension. So I probably wouldn't start with the bass, so we can get that out. Yeah, the little altar boy is great for, I really like using it on vocals, or sometimes I use it on a lot of stuff, but just at the end of every, say, 16 bars, you just change the format of the vocal or the little vox stab. Again, it's something quite subtle, but it shows you that there's something about to change or just keeps your ear interested. So I can just automate those in quite quickly. So I've put a fill in there. What I really like to do often on drums, whenever there's a sample sound that feels a bit sort of too big or it's taking up a bit too much space, I go into the sample, highlight them. On warp mode, I change it to beats. And then on the transients, I just do this forward arrow. And then the percentage here, when I dial it back, it basically like tightens the drum or whatever sound it is that whatever the sample is. So you'll hear the difference as I start dialing it back. So I use it a lot if for fills. What I would also do, I quite like the idea of doing snare and drum fills again at the moment. So if I was doing like a long drum fill, I would do the same thing to the sample of the drum and just like tighten everything so that when everything drops, you get the full impact of the drum. Closing the EQ a little bit on that high string there, just so that it's not taking up too much, because you want it to be more of a subtle undertone, just to give a bit of tension rather than a main element. And then I'll probably filter them in, so choosing the trusty auto filter, I'm just going to draw the automation in. Again here, just draw it in. Again, just to create like subtle movements in the track. And I'm just going to copy that part of the arrangement straight over. Do that. I'm just going to insert some time there to get rid of that. Paste that in. I want to just add like a bit of another delay on this, just to kind of the H delay, just a long, I don't want it to be in time, so I'm just going to do it on the milliseconds. There we go. Also the Aphex Vintage Exciter is quite good on vocals. It kind of just cuts out a lot of the middle and the low end, and it sometimes just puts it into a nice space in the mix. So let's see if that does its job here. Let's sit without, sit with. I quite like it with, so I'm going to leave it on. Often, like you know what plugins will sound good, but until you actually do it and A/B them, it's like you just need to test things. There's something about the piano that I'm not fully on board with yet. I think I'll probably keep this in, automate it, open up the filter, let it kind of flourish right before the end. Yeah, I'm liking the sort of old vintage warmth of that. What that's kind of reminding me of is maybe I want to add in a bit more atmosphere, some vinyl, just some like a bit more dust, so that it feels like it's on wax and we made it 20 years ago. There we go. It's a bit too much in the mix, so I just EQ a bit of that out. Could also try the trick that I did earlier, where you put the true verb from Waves on there, put on the New York plate, and then bring down the direct, turn the balance up a little bit, and the decay down. I'm just going to add an EQ on those vocals overall as well. 560. Take a little bit of the top end off and the middle. Clearing out that drop a little bit, didn't feel like it necessarily needed the vocal there. So then it hopefully will feel nicer when it comes back in halfway through that bar. I really like doing auto pans on the snares, especially during a fill. It just kind of sends, it's like it's sending you around the room. Make it a bit quicker. Okay, great. And I'm just going to turn that on, automate that on just for that section, and then off there. And then I think I'll put it back on for any of the fills. A good trick to kind of add a bit of movement. You can get the LFO tool, add that in here, and then you can map it to any parameter that you want. So if we map that to the frequency, it's quite intense there, so you can speed it up or slow it down. You can change the depth, so we don't really need it to go quite as high as that, or as fast. So we can slow it right down. And then on that drop, I'm going to turn off the filter so that the vocals come straight in, and gives it a bit of variation from this drop. I feel like each drop needs to have something extra going on or something slightly different, so that, again, just keeps everybody moving. And then on the second drop, I probably do the piano again, and then once the final drop comes in, keep the piano in, just so I'm just going to see how that sounds here. To kind of keep this going and take it to the next stage, I would just duplicate bits of time from the arrangement to kind of get it into a space where it feels like a full arrange is there. So maybe start having the piano coming in here, like filtered, and then drop into the piano fully for the last breakdown. So I'll just copy this across, and I would double it as it's the last build up. Automate this so that the drama feels like it's rising throughout here. I would definitely work on more automation, making sure everything just feels like it's coming in at the right point. Everything feels smooth. I'd double this section here so you have like a minute of dancing. You kind of want, I'm feeling like everything kind of in at the last section. And then from there, start building your outro. So it's probably similar to the second section here. From there, I would then listen to it from start to finish, see where it needs attention, what bits are exciting me, what bits maybe feel that there's, you know, we can add some more flourishes, or we can add some more changes, or even just completely add in a few new elements just to kind of bring every part of it alive. Bounce it off, upload it onto a private SoundCloud, and then try it and wait for a week and then go back and listen again. I like to kind of listen in a different space to the studio. So if I'm at the gym, or if I'm like cycling, or just a different space that's not where you've created it, I find that I can sometimes I just get a different perspective on the track. If you can wait a week and then listen, like actively listen, it's a really important trick. You might do that 5 or 10 times, depending on how intricate the track is or how evolved you want it to be. And then finally, once you're at that point, that's when you should send it out to people. Also test it if you're a DJ. Obviously testing it out in the club is great, or sending it to your mates that DJ and having a listen on a different set of speakers, or just in a vibe. Like getting a crowd reaction is a really invaluable part of creating music.